There's an old Chinese saying that if you keep going the way you're going, you're going to end up where you're headed. An inch of topsoil left isn't very much. We've lost anywhere from 3 to 5 feet. The fact that these powerful people are saying there's going to be starvation, they haven't said that kind of thing before. It certainly seems like there's a stage being set for further discombobulation and dysfunction. The faith is being put on human cleverness to be able to come up with concoctions faster than microbes and viruses can adapt. And that's not a bet you want to take. The solution has to be something the system can control to keep the farmer enslaved. The beauty of preparation is whether times get better or get worse, you're never going to regret being prepared for either. My household is ready. I mean, that's the ultimate freedom, right? If your food depends on a $1 billion lab owned by Bill Gates for you to eat, that's a pretty vulnerable situation.
Are there any other pitfalls of modern agriculture? Like, you talk a lot about erosion. Can you maybe just educate our audience a bit about mismanagement of the land in that respect, and how and what the situation is right now as it stands with respect to topsoil erosion? Because we always hear, there's an inch of topsoil left, but what do we mean by that, and what is the cause of it?
Yeah, well, an inch of topsoil left isn't very much. I mean, on our farm here, since Europeans came, we, depending on who you talk to, we've lost anywhere from 3 to 5 feet of soil. I just returned from a week in Israel, and boy, you talk about a loss of soil. I mean, that whole region is just nothing but rocks. Of course, they've abused it for a lot longer than we've abused it here. The truth is that the soil, of course, is the earth's womb. I mean, and it's our womb as well. As the soil health and wealth goes, so goes the health and wealth of a nation. And you study through history, the Greeks, the Romans, the Indians, the Mongols. I mean, all these cultures rose and fell on the back of their soil. And so, it behooves us to, at the end of the day, maintaining healthy soil is more important than maintaining a healthy Wall Street any time of day. And so how do we do that? And what's going on? Well, what's going on is, first of all, tillage. And so, if you look at natural systems, natural ecology, what you see is very few annuals. You see primarily perennials that don't need planting all the time. And because the planting all the time, the annuals requires some sort of tillage or breaking the prairie, breaking the vegetative cover. So as you begin breaking that perennial cover, you expose the soil to the washing, to the raindrops. I mean, raindrops hitting bare soil are like bombs. They're hitting it at 80 miles an hour, and they make these little craters in the soil. You've seen them after a rain, little craters in the soil. And so the soil needs to be covered, and nature doesn't till, nature doesn't plow. So we are violating. And it's one thing to do a little bit, to have your garden, to do a little bit of tillage on something, but to do it on the kind of scale that we're doing. Now, I can hear people say, well, if we don't do it at scale, we can't feed everybody. Oh, yes, we can. The first thing is there's no reason to feed herbivores grain. And 30% of all the grain grown on the planet goes through herbivores: sheep, goats, cows, both beef cows and dairy cows. They're not supposed to eat any grain at all. So then you start pecking away at the grain acreage that we need. And then you realize, well, if we hooked up all of our food wastes to chickens, then we could have all of our eggs without having any grain as well, because the chickens would eat food scraps, which is what they did throughout history. We don't have to now have the grain for that. And then you take the pigs, and the pigs then can fatten in our forests where there's, nuts and all sorts of things that drop, and again, reduce grain. So the fact is, grain production I'll just throw out a number, is probably it could be reduced by 70% if we started integrating our systems instead of segregating, and if we started leveraging perennials instead of eliminating perennials and substituting with annuals. And the single biggest way to erode soil is to make it naked and to take that vegetative cover off, which is what's required for growing grain. Right now, a bushel of corn costs us, I think it's 2 bushels of soil. You can't keep doing that. We've got a dead zone the size of Rhode Island in the Gulf of Mexico, primarily from soil washing off. And the final thing about maintaining resilient soil is organic matter. And we've dropped in the U.S. We've dropped, and I think this is pretty much North America wide. Organic matter in our soils has dropped from somewhere around 6 to 7% down to 1%. And organic matter is the sponge of the soil. That's decomposing vegetation. And that's what makes it soft and spongy, be able to absorb water, to be able to hold an aggregate like a chocolate cake. Good soil should look like a chocolate cake. It shouldn't look like like concrete. And so maintaining that organic matter is critical. So I can just use in the U.S. here. If we took all the biomass that burns, that we spend $5 billion, in fighting all these forest fires, and we chipped all that biomass and used it for composting, and substituted instead of buying any chemical fertilizer, instead we go to a carbon economy, biomass driven with decomposition. We would not only create an incredible number of jobs for people who enjoy working outside and want to do something with their hands, we would eliminate dependency on Putin and and petroleum-based chemical fertilizer, and we would actually build organic matter in soil, which is more productive and less susceptible to erosion, and we would start building soil instead of losing soil. So, and ultimately that means we would build cultural wealth instead of depleting cultural wealth, which ultimately goes back to the wealth of the soil.
Yeah, it seems inevitable that if we continue the practices that we're doing now, like you're saying, that's fascinating. I've never heard somebody explain it that way, by tearing up the soil. It's actually an unnatural process, and we're degrading and slowly eroding. And isn't that what happened? Is that something similar that happened during the Dust Bowl of the 30s? Is that what?
Yes, absolutely. That's exactly what happened. Yes, and it's been done. The plow has done more damage than just about anything. And I mean, just think about this: when Ed Faulkner wrote Plowman's Folly in 1950, imagine a book by the title Plowman's Folly. He sold like 500,000 copies of that book in less than a year, and it was a runaway bestseller. Of course, in that day we had 10 times as many farmers as we do today, so the audience was a lot bigger. But I mean, we've known the devastation of the plow for a long time, but we're addicted to a fundamentally segregated, grain-based, convenience-oriented production system and a cheap food system. Let me just say that if you're committed to a cheap food system, you're never going to get ecological integrity. The only way to get ecological integrity is to have a fair-priced food policy, not a cheap food price policy. And I get real aggressive about this. People talk about prices. Say, look, we've got the cheapest food on the planet here. Why? Because all our costs are built in. We're not putting on society externalized costs. Half of all cases of diarrhea are caused by foodborne bacteria. Well, what's a case of diarrhea worth? I don't know, but it's probably worth something. And if the food system started bearing the brunt of the cost of erosion, of dead zones, of infertile frogs, three-legged salamanders, diarrhea, MRSA, C. diff, superbugs. If the food system started bearing those costs very quickly, we'd find out that food priced the way our farm prices food is actually the cheapest food on the planet, especially then when you start looking at the nutrition of it. If you start saying, well, good night, I've got to eat 25 supermarket eggs to get the same folic acid as I get in one of your eggs, suddenly that makes our 50% price premium look like peanuts.
Yeah, it's an incredible way to look at it. If only people had that long-term understanding of cost, and then we would perhaps have a more robust and resilient system like the one you're talking about. On the topic of eggs, might as well touch on that. What's your take on this rise in egg price, and as it pertains to, obviously it's to do with bird flu, but is there any other contributing factors here?
Yeah, well, I don't know. As far as I know, it's strictly avian influenza, and I know that there is pushback on that from people that are, these companies are gouging in prices and all that. But I think it's important to understand that eggs are a highly perishable product, and so as you move toward perishability, you have an unusually close relationship between supply and demand. Supply and demand on, I don't know what, let's just take, motor oil. Motor oil supply and demand can be pretty far apart. There's a lot of room for adjustment. If suddenly there's a run on motor oil, there's a lot of room for adjustment before you run out, because inventories can be really, really high due to the fact that it's a non-perishable product. But when you come to eggs, they're so highly perishable that the supply and demand has very little wiggle room. In other words, the eggs coming in have to be very, very reflective of the eggs being purchased. And so with eggs, with something like this, that's a real tight supply demand issue because of perishability, a glitch in supply of even 3%. I mean, so there's 100 people. There's 100 people that want a dozen eggs. If suddenly there's only 96 dozen instead of 100 dozen, those 96 dozen eggs are not just going to go up, 4% because there's a 4% shortage. No, they're going to go way up because everybody is scrambling for those 96 dozen eggs. Those 100 customers are scrambling for those 96 dozen eggs. In other things, canned things, breakfast cereals, there's a much bigger inventory pipeline because they're not as perishable. So little glitches in supply don't show up as quickly. Eggs, it shows up quicker, and it's demonstrably a bigger hiccup in the system because of the perishability of the product.
That's interesting. And what is your take on avian influenza, like with respect to the outbreak, the seriousness of it, and how they're going to go about dealing with it? Because by the sounds of things, they're trying to vaccinate billions of chickens or something.
Yeah. Well, you can be assured that there will be a mechanical view toward life, just like we've done with everything else, and the faith is being put on human cleverness to be able to come up with concoctions faster than microbes and viruses can adapt. And that's not a bet you want to take. I mean, these microbes and viruses are able to they go through their generations in sometimes seconds. In other words, they get born, they go to school, they court, they marry, and they have babies in seconds. Okay. So we're just not going to be able to keep up with, concoctions from the devil's pantry, to be able to keep up fast enough for staying ahead of this. So I will tell you that that my approach, if you want a difference of opinion of the approach for how do you do with it. The thing is, HPAI, high path avian influenza, never kills all the birds. It only kills some. In fact, they're destroying a lot of houses that only have one positive sample. So you go and so the deaths. Here's the thing that I want the public to understand: when they say we've lost 58 million birds to avian influenza, no, we've only lost maybe a million of those 58. The other 57 million were healthy that were killed. When they say euthanasia, they say, euthanasia. Well, that's wrong too. It's extermination. Euthanasia is what you do to your old, dog when he is in pain and can't get up anymore, and you put him down for euthanasia. Extermination is what you do to things that are healthy. And so, in my view, for example, I know a guy that that had a flock, get avian influenza, a flock of 3,000 birds, but 250 of them were healthy and never died. Well, wouldn't you think that somebody would say, hey, let's take those 250 survivors and breed them and keep their genetics. They obviously have strength and robustness that the other birds don't have. But nobody's even asking that question. That idea isn't even in the ballpark. But for you and I, intuitively, that's what we would do if we were in charge. We would say, well, who's surviving? Let's keep the survivors, and let's breed the survivors and build genetic strength in from the survivors. But that's not a solution, because the solution has to be some sort of pharmacological thing that I think, again, this comes full circle to the beginning of the program. The solution has to be something that makes the farmer dependent on somebody outside the farm. And so from a prepper mentality, if you want to bring your preparation in-house, I mean, that's the ultimate freedom, right? My household is ready. Okay. I mean, that's the mantra of a person who's prepared for dysfunction, for crisis, for whatever. The whole process of dealing with high-path avian influenza is to take away from the farmer the chance to create adaptable genetics, and instead make the farmer completely dependent on something outside his farm, something that the system can control, to keep the farmer enslaved to the system. Now, I in deference to the ag experts, I don't believe that they're trying to keep the farmer dependent. I don't think that's not a stated agenda item. Keep the farmer dependent on pharmaceuticals. I don't think that's their agenda, but that's the outcome of the plan when they won't let and won't use robust surviving birds as a genetic base to create the next generation of more robustness.
Yeah, well, they want a centralized solution, like you said, that is controlled from the top down. And the other irony is that they could potentially start exploring things like gain-of-function research, as I've already heard that they're considering whether or not they should start to look into this, because someday it's going to jump to humans. Yeah. And so why not? Let's make it happen faster, I guess.
Yeah. Well, how about instead we just look at how do we build the chicken's immune system? How do we build a chicken's immune system? Well, we certainly don't confine them in an airless, windowless, fecal particulate, a 10,000 birds or 20,000 bird situation. We put them in smaller flocks. We put them outside. We let them scratch and peck and express their chickenness and take the stress level off of them. I mean, it's the same thing. I mean, imagine if in the spring of 2020, Tony Fauci, our dear dude there in Washington. Well, what if he had stepped to the microphone and said, "Hey, America, hey, we're going to try something. I've got an idea for you. We're going to try something for a month. For 1 month, we're going to see if we can build our immune system. So here's what we're going to do. For 1 month, nobody's going to drink Coca-Cola, Dr. Pepper, or Mountain Dew. We're not going to drink any sugary drinks. For 1 month, we're going to cook from scratch in our kitchens. We're not going to go to McDonald's. We're not going to go to Burger King. We're not going to go to Carl's, and KFC. We're going to cook from scratch in our kitchens. For 1 month, we're all dehydrated, so we're going to drink, a 1.5 liters of water a day. So we hydrate. We're gonna exercise enough that you break a sweat once a day. We're gonna break a sweat once a day. We're gonna go out in the sun. We're gonna get out in the sun, get vitamin D for 20 minutes a day. 20 minutes a day, we're gonna get vitamin D. And nobody gets enough rest, so we're not gonna stay up late and watch TV. We're gonna go to bed early, and we're gonna sleep for 8 hours. Everybody's gonna get 8 hours of sleep a night. Instead of watching the news that just makes you paranoid and fearful, for every hour that you watch news, you have to watch comedy for 2 hours, so that you offset the depressive news with 2 hours of laughter. And finally, the final point here is that we're all going to sit down and make a list of all the people that you hate and that you'd like to get rid of, and you're going to write them down on a piece of paper, and you're going to forgive them all and take that vengeance and stress out of your life. Because stress is the number one way to suppress an immune system. Can you imagine if that had been done and we had tried that for a month? What do you think would have happened?
Well, I got to say, one of the things that you said that resonated with me the most, and I think you said it in the Food Inc. documentary. You said if we're treating our animals in factory farms in a certain way, how can we not expect that gun to be turned on ourselves at some point? And it's incredible that we literally became the factory farm chickens during the pandemic.
Yes.
Yes.
Lockdown, close the doors. That's right. Yeah.
Close the doors, get the sun out. All the things that would have helped us endure were discouraged, it seemed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's
yeah, that's right.
And I can only imagine, how that same mentality and approach is going to backfire in other ways, as other disasters unfold. So I think a lot of people, they look at the chickens, they look at the cows and the factory farms, and they pity those creatures, but, they fail to see what is actually happening around them, in terms of how we're structuring our urban lifestyles with the 15-minute cities and whatnot. Just to maybe change gears a little bit with respect to, we hear about the IMF and the WEF and the UN warning about famine and food shortages coming potentially in the future. Do you think that we're going to be impacted by that here, or is that primarily going to be a global South problem? And how severe do you think it would be? Or will be?
Yeah, well, again, I'm not a prophet, but there's an old Chinese saying that if you keep going the way you're going, you're going to end up where you're headed. And so again, I go back to what I mentioned earlier about the musings. When people, when these powerful people, as you mentioned, the World Economic Forum, Bill Gates, President Biden, when these powerful people muse about things, it probably means that something's coming on. And so it certainly seems like there's a stage being set for further discombobulation and dysfunction. I mean, just think of the things we've been through just in the last 3 years with empty store shelves from, initially COVID, and then supply chain issues, the fragility of that, then the war in Ukraine and all the saber rustling. And then we got China and Taiwan. We've got balloons coming over the U.S. I mean, and we've got trains being derailed. We've got processing plants with airplanes flying into them like kamikazes. I mean, this kind of stuff is just, it's just strange. It's weird, so the fact that these powerful people are saying there's going to be starvation, and I've heard the word a billion bandied about, that's a lot of people, and we just don't know what's gonna develop. The beauty of preparation is whether times get better or get worse, you're never going to regret being prepared for either. Preparedness is good in good times and bad times. Being prepared, for the worst case scenario is not lost investment if it doesn't happen. It just means that during all that time, while you don't know, you get to sleep a little better and you get to feel good about being part of the solution and not continuing the problem. And that always helps you sleep better.
What are some of the, I'm sure they're probably referencing fertilizer shortages, potash, natural gas prices in Europe. Is there any other specific factors that would contribute to this looming global famine that they're talking about?
Or is that?
Well, I think one of the biggest would be some sort of disease. We're seeing the high path avian influenza. What that's done. I mean, look at the news that's generated. Simply affecting, what is it? I think 6%. 6% of the nation's chicken laying egg supply, and we've got a 6% bobble in the number of chickens, and a tripling. Think about that. A 6% bobble in the inventory led to a 300% increase in price. So just think about that, magnitude in something else, and you start realizing how close to the chest a lot of this stuff is. So, I don't think anybody knows where things are, the $64 million question is, well, okay, if the paradigm finally exceeds its point of efficiency and collapses, what's the tipping point? When will that happen? Many of us thought it would happen before now, but nature is very resilient. Life wants to live, and so there's a lot of forgiveness in the system, and we don't know when it'll be, but the fact that the world leaders are musing and saying things like this, they haven't said that kind of thing before. You didn't hear anybody saying that kind of thing in the 80s, in the 70s, in the 60s. Nobody was saying that kind of thing. And so here they are saying this kind of thing. So, what do they know that I don't know? I don't know. But when 4 billionaires ask for an agrarian bunker, that gets your attention too.
Well, it sounds like what you're saying is very rational, logical thought process. I presume that they know what you know, and they know that the whole thing has to pass that critical point at some point in time, and they're just, anticipating that perhaps it's going to come sooner than later. Maybe it'll be triggered by a variety of other inputs not being there anymore, whether it be, I've always wondered, and I don't know if you have any thoughts on this, but like the pesticides and the superbugs, like where we'd ever stop, is there a risk in potentially stopping using these chemicals and then the explosion of some thing that we've been suppressing for so long emerges?
Yeah.
Like if we rip the Band-Aid off too fast, is that?
Yeah. Well, I think you're digging around an interesting topic. I was once, when I went to Australia to do some seminars, I'm in the baggage carousel, grabbing my bag off the carousel. I grabbed it, and there were these. It was a flight from Los Angeles, and I grabbed my bag off, and these two ladies standing there noticed my now. So on my luggage, I have a cow ear tag. People, you put stuff on your luggage to help you identify it. So I have cow ear tags on all of mine. And so I pulled mine off. These two ladies standing there noticed it, said, "Oh, that's a cow ear tag. Are you a farmer?" I said, "Yeah, I am." And they'd obviously been on the same flight with me from LA. I said, "So what are you doing here?" They said, "Oh, we work for Monsanto, and we're here on our way to Perth for a global, worldwide seminar on super weeds." and they were Americans, and they said that in the U.S. now, with the constant use of herbicides, especially in Arkansas, they've created such super weeds that the $500,000 combines that are used to harvest crops break down when they hit these weeds in the field. So they're actually hiring people to go in with machetes and pre-cut these massive, jack and the beanstalk weeds, super weeds, so that it doesn't destroy the combines when they come through and get the corn or wheat or whatever it is. And so that's just one little story to your point that's so well taken, that how far do you go down that path before that path runs out? And I think that's what that's what nobody knows, but it seems logical that at some point you simply can't keep going down that path, that path runs out. It dead ends somewhere. And that's the way to bet. And that's why I put my money, if you're a betting man, I put my money on the horses that have won the races throughout the eons of history. And those horses are not glyphosate, GMOs, and 10-10-10 chemical fertilizer. They're animals moving on pasture with regional genetics and local breeding and selection and fertility that's maintained by local carbon and biomass generated on site. Those are the systems that have won the test of time.
Yeah, it's like we're in an arms race with nature, but as my buddy Guy McPherson says, nature always bats last. So
that's exactly right.
Yeah,
that's exactly right.
So just to maybe conclude with respect to preparedness, then, like building a homestead. I know you briefly talked at the beginning about strategic relocation and obviously being near a place that has water. Obviously the climate should be right for, and you want to be away from disaster zones. Do you have any other tips, I guess, on somebody who maybe hasn't settled on an acreage yet, or hasn't, or is considering buying some land? Like, what are some of the things that they should know about that process? Because I've been a little on the fence, because the market's always uncertain for the past few years. But I've been meaning to, but it's almost like I'm looking for the perfect spot, and I don't want to, I'm reluctant. I've had some opportunities that have been okay, but maybe, anything in Canada, it's not going to be like Virginia in terms of, weather, but I think you know what I mean. Like, there's, at some point you have to settle. So what are some things that people should consider?
Yeah, well, I think to that point, you're never going to get the perfect place. Every place is going to have some level of imperfection. Now, the beauty of land is that it is a living thing, and so many of the most successful kind of guru homesteaders have gone to eroded poor quality land because you can't upgrade it, and so so that's a good thing. I think in general, another thing you want to think about is how restrictive are local ordinances. I mean, can you build a cabin without a permit? Can you build a little pond without a permit? Can you do a little bit of digging and scratching and construction, without having to get a license for a doghouse? And so there are places that there are more or less, ordinances. How stringent are they? Sometimes they're ordinances, but it's a pretty live and let live kind of, community. Get in there and think about your neighbors. What kind of neighbors are there? You want to be careful about getting next to neighbors that are living in the country, but their heart's in the city.
Hmm.
What you want is neighbors whose heart really is in the country. They haven't just moved the city to the country, and I think you know what I mean. I mean, these are folks who are quick to sue for whatever noise or an improperly constructed doghouse or chicken house, that sort of thing. So, think about the kind of community and the people right there around you where you are. But yeah, I definitely believe that it's good to not go completely into the boonies unless you want to be a mountain man. But it takes a lot of skill to be a mountain man, and generally you want to be near a person or near enough to people that know how to do electrical, plumbing, welding, some fabrication, woodworking. My trifecta on that. You want to be near people who know how to build things, grow things, and fix things. Those are the three critical factors: grow it, fix it, build it. And if you're geographically proximate to a helpful community where there's that level of mastery in growing, building, and fixing, that's better than any kind of retirement plan or cash bank account.
Yeah, I think you said recently in one of your interviews that you're not really fully self-reliant. You're more about finding that community, that there could be a degree of specialization as opposed to just one guy doing it all, like the mountain man in the woods. And I think sometimes as preppers, we take on all of those roles and become masters of nothing. So you have to, like you say, make community. And I don't know how a person would do that if they were looking for land, how you would suss out who your neighbors were. But I guess if there was a way to do it, then you should try, is what you're saying.
Yeah. Well, the thing about mountain men is most mountain men didn't have wives.
That's why they're called mountain men. Yeah.
If you want to take your wife with you, you might want to be near some sort of a community. But there is a kind of underground in this movement, homestead movement, and so that's one reason why you don't want to be in a hurry. I mean, I encourage people, if you want to make a move, make your move and rent. Get the proximity principle. The proximity principle is get as close to where you want to be as possible, and the next step will show itself. And so sometimes the best thing is just to get where you want to be, where you think you want to be, and spend some time there. Spend 4 or 5 months. Attend a couple local churches, some civic clubs, philanthropic. Circulate, and you can do some sleuthing that way.
That's really good advice. I never heard that before. I think that's if a person has the time, then they should definitely consider that.
Right.
And
right. All of that obviously depends on how mobile you are, all those kinds of things. But I also would really consider, do you have support somewhere? Do you have family or friends or somebody that in an area where there's some network, some supporting, even if it's 1 or 2 families, that you can bounce off of.
Yeah,
I guess my point is it's important to balance running away with embracing, and I think if I could just offer the attitudinal idea, I'm running into people who their whole persona, their whole deal is I'm running away from the city, I'm running whatever, and I mean I get that. Nobody, when the wheels fall off, nobody wants to be in a city. I get that. All right. But at the same time, you've got to temper that running away with, you've got to be running to something. And if all you're doing is if you're focused on nothing but running away, you might run into the arms of something that's not very good. And so you gotta balance that, the running away with a running to.
Funny you say that. I used to be an addictions counselor, and one of the things I always told people was, it's not about quitting something, it's about starting something new. And it's,
I like it.
because people get in this mindset when they say I have to quit, quit implies that you're getting rid of something that was good, when really what you're trying to do is start something that's better. So embracing the life as opposed to running away is a great way of looking at it. Now, you have a lot of information about how to actually build out your homestead, whether it's the mobile chicken coops or like how you do the permaculture stuff. Where's the best place for people to get information from you? What is there any starter books that you would recommend that you've written for the person who perhaps hasn't been exposed to you yet?
Yeah. So I wrote the last book I wrote is Polyface Micro, and it's basically everything we do here at scale down to the homestead level. Polyface Micro, success with livestock on a homestead scale, and so that's that's my how-to book for a small scale outfit. And that'll be very helpful. Then we have the have a video series, farm like a lunatic, and so that's a video series we have, and there's other things as well. And I invite people to come and visit. We're not that far away actually from quite a bit of Canada, especially eastern. Western Canada, yeah, we're pretty far, but Eastern Canada. There's a lot of Canadians that are closer to us than Americans up in, upstate New York and Maine, and some of those places are farther away than a lot of people in Canada.
Well, don't tell them that, because they're all going to come to your place when the shit hits the fan.
Ah.
Yeah, but no, that Polyface Micro, guys, go check out that book. And you said there was a video series. Now, is that free, or did they have to buy that, or how did they?
No. It's a course. But the title of the course is Farm Like a Lunatic. I'm of course the lunatic, and we've got chickens. We've got a foundation starting. There's several of them out, and so that's when we continue to try to crank out one or two of those a year and try to get more content. We're up to 25 hours of content now, so it's gradually building.
Well, I'm not one to buy courses on things, but that is one course I would definitely strongly encourage my subscribers to go and check out. And do you have a YouTube channel yet, or are you just?
No, I don't do. I'm not a social media. I don't even have. Here's my. You want to see my phone? There's my phone. It's a.
Wow.
I don't even have a smartphone.
The latest model. The latest model 3G.
Yeah. So I'm just not of that social media generation, but I'm trying to.
Well, it's funny you say that, because you're all over YouTube. I mean,
I know, but I don't do any of it. It's people that have been here or done stuff. It's not me generated. It's other people generated.
All right. Well, anyways, it's been great chatting with you today. This has been a fascinating conversation, and I hope to get down there to actually meet you in person one of these days. And again, I'd encourage people to go and check out Joel's books and check out that course. I know I'm going to. So thanks a lot for coming out.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
The best way to support this channel is to support yourself by gearing up at CanadianPreparedness.com, where you'll find high-quality survival gear at the best prices, no junk, and no gimmicks. Use discount code PREPPINGGEAR for 10% off. Don't forget, the strong survive, but the prepared thrive. Stay safe.